Привет, I'm Chuck Olenek, otherwise known as Yaroslav. It's the name I was baptized with. I've been talking about the Pysanky since it is the Easter season. And I thought I could handle this in one video, which evolved into two, which has now evolved into three. We're going to wrap it up by the end of this video. I hope you stick with me. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of different egg-shaped objects that all pass themselves off as pysanky. And I remember telling friends about this, going, wait, your family makes these and then you take them to church and you eat the eggs after all that work? No, my family really didn't do this. All right, that's called a krashanki, and it comes from a word meaning to decorate. So these are the plain ones that you are intending to take to church to get blessed, and then you're going to eat them. Or they're also the ones that are, because they've been blessed, they've got all kinds of power associated with them. So these are the ones that are placed in the fields, to ensure good crops, and placed in the mangers of the animals, and, placed in, these are also the ones that will be taken to cemeteries for during Mavka week, which is the week after Easter. And it's the actual day, that Sunday is called Provodi. And that's where the graves are blessed, and you leave one of these krashanki there. And they're just basically a plain color. All right, so those were the Easter eggs that I grew up with. Okay, now there's another variant that's called listovki, and what a listovki is basically you wrap some leaves around the egg before you dye it, and then when you remove the leaves basically, whatever the leaves covered, that remains white. Okay, so that's a fairly simple design, and it's pretty much a relative of the pysanky. Then there's the karapanki, and there's the word in Ukrainian that suggests like droplets. And the way this is done is, this is basically, it's a wax resist method, just like the pysanky. And you take beeswax and you just drip it. And you create dots. And then you dump, put it in the dye. And that was considered almost like a proto-pysanky. Okay, then there's the pysanky proper, made with the whole written with the whole wax resist method. And the thing is, this is also done with wooden eggs, and those wooden eggs are often called pysanky. That's not actually correct. All right, now there's another kind, which I kind of refer to as a fake version. It's called a dripanki. It comes from a word meaning to scratch or etch. So what you've done is you've already dyed the egg with one color, and then you take some sort of a tool that's sharp, maybe some sort of a stylus, and you scratch the designs on. There's also an etching type where you might use something like vinegar or sauerkraut juice to etch at the egg and get to the white part. Then there's another kind where you straight up paint it. So that means it's not a pysanky, because pysanky are written. And that's just simply more decorative. And that's been a thing that's really come into its own in the last couple of centuries. You also have another type where you glue beads onto it in order to create the design. And another type where you might be wrapping the pith from, I think it's cattails, and then bits of yarn, and that's more of a Polish thing. And then there's another kind where it is just done by the men, because the men want to prove they can do something, and they wrap the egg in wire and decorate it that way. We keep talking about writing pysanky. So what's being written? Well, in pre-Christian times, a lot of these symbols would end up imbuing the egg with magical powers. They could ward off evil spirits. It could banish winter. It could guarantee a good harvest. It could bring a person good luck. After 988, when Volodymyr was baptized and Christianity became the state religion in Kiev, these symbols started to undergo a change. There's thousands and thousands of these motifs that are on pysanky. How do we know that they're authentic? How do we know that they're original? Some are and some aren't. Well, what are our sources? Oh, since the eggs are pretty fragile and you can't really keep them around, embroidery motifs, you'd find a lot in, cross-stitching. You would find a lot of these same things carved onto furniture, onto everyday utensils. You would find them in all sorts of woodworking projects. So a lot of these designs are around. But in the 19th century, this stops being, at least for most people, stops being about magic, and it becomes about decoration. And in some cases, national pride. So what we can do is we can take a look at these thousands of motifs, but we can't exactly figure out exactly what's there. This isn't like a decoder ring, or you've punched it into Google and say, what the hell, what does this mean? It's still something that you can look at as far as, okay, there's broad categories. Several families of these motifs. Okay, so amongst the most popular and most ancient pysanky motifs, those are simple geometric patterns. The egg itself is most often divided by straight lines into squares, triangles, and other shapes. Hey, even I can do this. It's not like tracing a photograph. These shapes are then filled in with other forms and designs. You could have triangles there, curls, spirals, tripods, dots, hearts, and you'll see a lot of these on pysanky today. It could be symbolizing the Holy Trinity. In ancient times, they symbolized other trinities, such as the cycle of life, birth, life, death. Diamonds are sometimes said to symbolize knowledge. There's one adaptation of geometric design that's not a symbol per se. It's called the 40 triangles. There's actually 48. Translation, sorokolin, 40 wedges. Sorok is 40. Okay, and it doesn't really have any known ancient meaning. It's often said to represent the 40 days of Lent, 40 martyrs, 40 days that Christ spent in the desert, 40 weeks a woman is pregnant. Curls and spirals could represent the serpent Zmi, or Zme, and are said to have a meaning of defense or protection. That spiral is said to be protective against an evil spirit, which, if it happens to wander into a protected home, is going to get drawn into the spiral and trapped there. Ooh, big word time. Skevomorphic designs. That's man-made objects, okay? And that's the second largest group of motifs, and this is stuff you would find on the farm. So some of these symbols are going to undergo some changes, as far as interpretation. Like a ladder, ooh, that's symbolizing prayers going up to heaven now. And you would have the resceto. Resceto is like a sieve. So it could be representing a plowed field. It could be representing good being separated from evil, shaking stuff through the sieve. And you could have rakes or combs, and those are supposed to be invoking a good harvest. Not combs like hair, all right? So more like harrows. Um, and then you'd have windmills, and this is going to be like a weird crossover one, because the windmill becomes a variation of the svarha, and the svarha is getting into that swastika motif, except that, the Slavs would call it a svarha. And that symbolized the sun for them. So maybe you're trying to invoke, hey, let's get enough sun. All right. And that gets us into cosmomorphic motifs. Ooh, another big word. And that's basically dealing with, the sun fitting in as far as like probably the most common one is going to be the 8-pointed star, which is going to tend to, symbolize the sun. You might also see the moon depicted as a circle with a cross in it. It is begged to shed its light at night to help the traveler and to chase away evil powers from the household. Stars could be seen represented as dots. What else can you end up having? Remember, I'm just grouping these into broad categories. You could have eternity bands or meanders, and those are basically wavy lines. And you could have plants of various kinds. You could have the tree of life. You could have animals, and it was often common to just depict parts of animals like horns. You could have symbols that are quite blatantly Christian symbols, or symbols that were transformed into Christian symbols like the cross. And then there's all the modern stuff. As I mentioned before, patriotic symbols, which, is much more of a recent thing. That is probably more than you ever wanted to know about the Easter egg, the Pysanky. But I intend to keep exploring more Slavic stuff and trying to bring it to you. I hope you stick with me.